headed out on a little adventure here. I'm headed to the Alberta Railway Museum that's located on the northeastern outskirts of Edmonton, Alberta, where I live. It's a museum I haven't been to for over 30 years. The last time I was out there would be the early 1990s. At the time I was an avid model railroader, and I even had several articles published on my layout in Canadian Railway Modeler magazine. But as time went on, I had to concentrate more on my career as a security guard, and then my mother took very ill with Alzheimer's, so all my time was taken up taking care of her. And after I retired, I started traveling the world. I was very seldom at home, and then after that I courted and married my wife. So now I have health problems, and getting down to the basement to work on it isn't very easy anymore. But I want to go see how this museum has changed in the last 30 years and bring back some happy memories. So come along and let's see what we can do. Well, here we are at the Alberta Railway Museum.
The museum's main area of operations is the former St. Albert train station. The St. Albert station was built in 1909 for the Canadian Northern Railway, one of the predecessors of the Canadian National Railway, with a freight storage area added in 1921. Originally, the station's exterior was wood, but was stuccoed and insulated in 1937. And was moved to the museum in 1973 and was renovated between 1982 to 86. I visited the museum on the Civic Long Weekend when the museum was running a train, so I purchased a ticket to go for a ride along with my admission ticket in the gift shop in the station. In addition to displays on the railway's role in transportation in Canada, there were also displays in how the railway aided in the ways people communicated over the vast distances of this country. Up until the 1950s, communication between communities relied mainly on the post office, as there was no internet and not everyone had a telephone. The museum had a post office rail car on display, in which postal clerks would pick up, sort, and deliver mail for the various communities along the railway's route while the train traveled along. The train didn't need to stop to pick up and deliver mail if there were no passengers to board the train at the various stations. The mail bag with the local mail for the community would be thrown out the open door of the mail car, and the mail for pickup would be picked up on the fly using this mail crane and a hook on the rail car. This film from 1903 shows how it was done. The postmaster would hook up the outbound mail bag on the crane, and as the train passed along, the local mail bag would be thrown out the door, and the hook would grab the outbound mail bag to be taken inside the rail car for sorting. The postal system was efficient but slow. Sending a letter any great distance and awaiting a reply could take days or even weeks. There were times when this was too slow, and so the railways offered a telegraph service to send messages quickly by way of telegraph wires using Morse code. To send a telegram, you were charged by the letter, making them expensive. So the messages were always short and to the point. And more often than not, a telegram was a harbinger of bad news and only sent when someone died or was very sick. The museum had a display of a telegram office set up in the station, along with examples of the various telegram keypads used over time. In another room of the train station was a bell and information regarding XC&R steam locomotive 1392. When I visited the Alberta Railway Museum on September the 5th, 1987, the museum had 1392 under steam and were using it to pull the passenger car to give people rides that weekend. 1392 was built in 1913 by the Montreal Locomotive Works for the Canadian Northern Railway and was operated by Canadian National from 1920 until it was retired in 1955. After that, 1392 was on display at the Edmonton exhibition grounds before being donated to the Alberta Railway Museum. 1392 is the type of locomotive known as a 10-wheeler, meaning it has 4 wheels up front and 6 driver wheels for a total of 10 altogether. I didn't see 1392 this visit, and I heard it may be undergoing maintenance to get it up and going again. I headed out into the yard and paid a visit to CN Caboose 78185. I remember this caboose from my visits to the museum many years ago. It looks like the caboose was repainted and was looking good. I climbed aboard to have a look inside. CNR Caboose 78185 was built in 1929 in the CNR Transcona car shops in Winnipeg. It was acquired by the museum in 1968 after it was retired from rail service. The caboose served as both an office and living space for the train's conductor and brakeman while on shift. The cupola seats have backs that can flip to face the direction in which the train is running. There was a time when train crews were made up of at least 3 men, and the caboose was a necessary item at the end of every train. But that time has passed, and today a train can be operated with just 2 crewmen working from the locomotive, making the caboose redundant to be replaced by an end-of-train device. In many ways, a sad end of an era. Time to take a look at some of the locomotives on display in the museum's yard. Let's start with CNR number 4, a small diesel center cab switcher locomotive made by General Electric in 1956 that came into service with Canadian National during the railway's conversion from steam to diesel locomotives in the 1950s. It was sold to a steel plant in British Columbia in 1964 and was retired and donated to the Alberta Railway Museum in 2012. Next, we'll take a look at CNR Diesel Switcher 7944. When I visited the museum in October 1988, they were running this locomotive, and I got some better photos taken at a better angle that visit. CN 7944 is a Class GS10A CNR diesel electric switcher locomotive built in 1946 by General Motors as an NW2 switcher. The CNR used this type of locomotive to shunt or switch cars around their railway yards. 7944 was retired by the CNR in 1976 when it was discovered to have several engine problems, including a warped engine block, making it uneconomic to repair. After its donation to the Alberta Railway Museum, the locomotive was repaired by volunteers and was operational again in 1988. The photos I took in October 1988 would have been taken shortly after the locomotive was restored. Let's take a brief look at some of the rail equipment on display at the museum for the NAR, or Northern Alberta Railway. The Northern Alberta Railway was jointly owned by both Canadian National Railway and Canadian Pacific Railway and served Northern Alberta and northeastern British Columbia. The NAR was founded in 1929 and existed as a separate company until 1981, when it was absorbed into the Canadian National Railway. The museum had on display NAR Caboose 13025, built in 1953 by the Canadian Car and Foundry. After the NAR's amalgamation into the CNR Railway in 1981, the caboose was renumbered CN78978. It was acquired by the museum in 1983. The most striking difference of this caboose to the CNR caboose owned by the museum is that NAR 13025 utilizes a bay window instead of a cupola. The museum had on display NAR Locomotive 302, a GMD-1 diesel locomotive, manufactured in London, Ontario in 1959 by General Motors Diesel and entered service with the NAR in 1960. In 1979, NAR 302 was renamed Chief Matus after the First Nations chief who signed Treaty No. 8 in 1899, the last treaty signed with the First Nations in Alberta. The GMD-1 locomotive was a uniquely Canadian locomotive built to run on the light branch line rails common in the Canadian prairie provinces. Built from 1958 to 1960, the CNR owned 96 GMD-1s and the NAR owned 5. The Alberta Railway Museum obtained NAR 302 Chief Matus in 2014. We come now to the most modern locomotive on the museum's grounds, CN Locomotive 4618, a General Electric Dash 8 C40-8M locomotive built in 1990 for the British Columbia Railway. When CN acquired BC Rail in 2003, 4618 was painted in CN livery. 4618 has a body style known as a draper taper, named after the CNR designer, CN's Chief Motive Power Officer, William Draper. Locomotives with this body style featured a full-length cowl-type car body with the Canadian wide safety cab. The body slanted in just behind the cab rear doors to theoretically make it easier for the crew to view to the rear of the locomotive. For the most part, draper taper locomotives are a thing of the past. CN removed their draper taper locomotives from service in the late 1990s and early 2000s due to mechanical problems. The few that survive are in railway museums. We have come to the last, but definitely not the least locomotive we will examine in this video. CNR 9000. Canadian National Number 9000 is an EMD F3A diesel locomotive built by the General Motors Electromotive Division for the Canadian National Railway in 1948. 9000 was the first road freight locomotive built for a Canadian railway. It logged 2.5 million miles in revenue service from 1948 until its retirement from CN in October 1971. The train is pulling into the station, so I better get on board for my ride and get my ticket punched.
Thank you, sir.
There you go.
Oh, you want to go somewhere exotic, so let me put you in Venice.
Looks like I'm off to Venice, so I'd better wrap up this video. Till we meet again, everyone keep safe and well.